All right, we're live. Welcome into the Panther-Lair Show here on Tuesday night. Started a couple minutes late due to the technical difficulties of getting the stream going, and I apologize if you have some background noise during this thing. There's a little ambiance to the Panther-Lair offices, to the Panther-Lair studios. As you can see, they're illustrious and very luxurious. You can check them out here as you watch the podcast. We welcome everyone into the live stream every Tuesday night at 8:30 rather. We like to get together, talk a little pit sports on the live stream on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, we release the podcast through the week. If you're here on the live stream, you know about the live stream. If you listen to the podcast, I highly recommend that you check out the live stream because we have a lot of fun. We get to interact. We get to have a little conversation about pit sports. We get to, you have the comment section there, and you can chime in and share your thoughts and questions and reactions. And we always, it's fun to have that interaction. It's always entertaining. Hope everyone's had a good week so far. I say a week so far. It's Tuesday, or maybe Wednesday if you're listening to the podcast. But it's sort of how it feels. Time moves in strange ways. But since we did our last podcast, since last Tuesday, Pitt got a couple more commitments, and they're up to 16 for the class. They got 2 commitments on Friday afternoon and evening. 2 more additions to the class, 2 more interesting guys. The first one to commit was a local kid, Stephon Hall from Central Valley. He's a safety. And the last time Pitt got a safety out of Central Valley, that worked out pretty well. We'll talk about him in a second. The commitment that came after that was Khalil Anderson, a cornerback out of Georgia, 5'11", 175, a 3-star prospect on Rivals. He's got about 20 offers or so. His Power 5 offers were Duke, Kansas, Kansas State, Michigan State, Syracuse, Wake Forest, and obviously Pitt. And this interesting guy, Khalil Anderson. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to check him out or watch his film or look into Khalil Anderson, but I think Pitt got a really good corner in Khalil Anderson. I think they're going to have I think Khalil Anderson is going to be one of those recruits that Pitt has to fight to hold on to throughout the recruiting cycle, because I think he's going to become a target for a lot of schools if he's not already. And I think he was down to Pitt and Michigan State as his top 2 options. Obviously an interesting connection there with Pat Narduzzi coming from Michigan State and running similar defenses, at least to what Michigan State ran in the past. We'll see what they run under their new coach now. But Anderson really, you watch his film, and it's not always an easy thing to pick up on. It's not always an easy thing to see. But he even said it. I asked him when I interviewed him after he committed. I said, what is Archie Collins, Pitt's cornerbacks coach? What is and the Pitt coaches? What do they like about your game? What do you do well in the field? And he said one thing that he does is, or one thing he thinks is a strength of his, is his football IQ, his understanding of the game, and his ability, his feel for the game. And I think you can kind of see that. You can sort of pick up on it with the way he moves on the field and anticipates things and the plays that he makes. I think he's a really good corner, and I would say definitely underrated. We have him as a 5.5 3-star. Let me look at his profile real quick. I have it brought up here on Rivals.com. Yeah, 5.5 3-star, which I think is the lowest possible 3-star ranking. I think that number is going to jump. I don't know if he'll get up to 4-star status, but I think he's going to move his way up through the 3-star range, up into the high end by the time this recruiting cycle is over. I think Pitt got a steal. It's another recruit out of Atlanta. We've seen them try to make inroads in Georgia, which is another positive, of course, for the staff. They're trying to dig into the Peach State and get some more prospects out of there. They got a couple last year. Now they've gotten a couple this year so far in this recruiting class, Khalil Anderson being the most recent. Then, of course, they got Preston Levant, the linebacker, who committed when did he commit? Last month, about a month ago. And so you're seeing a little bit of the Georgia efforts paying off, and you're really seeing probably the biggest thing with Khalil Anderson, other than him just I think being a really good player, you're seeing more of this push for defensive backs and cornerbacks in particular. And I think they want corners and safeties, but after Noah Bigelow a week ago committed, a kid out of Florida. A week earlier, I should say. It's been about 2 weeks now since Noah Bigelow committed. And then Khalil Anderson committing. That's 2 corners in the class so far. And the coaches aren't done. They're not going to stop with just 2 cornerbacks. I think they want a lot of corners in this class, and there's a reason for that. It's because their roster is getting a little thin at corner. And this is an interesting position that we haven't, well, I shouldn't say we haven't. We have talked about this. I think we've talked about this a fair amount of Pitt's cornerback depth and maybe the fact that we haven't talked about it enough. I've brought it up a few times because I think it's relevant. You've really got high end. You've got Damari Mathis and Jason Pinnock, who are really good. I think you feel good about those guys as you're starting corners. I think you feel good about what they're going to be able to do for you on the field, and so that gives you confidence. For this season. The problem is what you have behind those guys. They're both seniors, and you even saw it last year with Pitt's corners. They rotated them. it was Mathis, Pinnock, and Dane Jackson, but they rotated those guys a lot. So much so that you could really, based on the snaps and the rep counts, Dane Jackson played more snaps than anybody else on Pitt's defense. But I think you could say that Pinnock and Mathis got starter level snaps. And even if they weren't always, I don't know if Pinnock made any starts. Did he? I think Mathis might have started every game opposite Jackson. I could be wrong about that, but I think Mathis started more games than Pinnock did, but they played the kind of snaps that you would see out of starters. And I think that's the way the coaches would like to have it. They would like to have that kind of rotation to keep guys fresh, to keep guys moving on and off the field. And I think they'd like to do that again, but they don't have, last year they went into that season with Jackson, Mathis, and Pinnock all having experience. This year they're only going in with 2 guys who have experience. You look through the rest of this roster of corners, returning guys, Marquez Williams, I think Pro Football Focus said he played like 16 or 19 snaps at cornerback last year. Judson Tallender and A.J. Woods both got on the field, I think, if not every game, a lot of games, but it was all at special teams. So, that's the extent of it. That's all you have in terms of the returning roster. Otherwise, you're talking about the freshmen who are coming in. And even the freshmen are up in the air. Even the freshmen are an uncertainty when you have Hunter Sellers and Javonte Royal and Rashad Battle. There was a point when Pitt was talking to each of those guys about playing safety. And I think as their depth situation, as it played out through the winter and into the spring, they said, all right, all 3 of you are going to start at cornerback, and then we'll figure it out after that. All 3 of them could play safety. I'm not sure if they could all play corner, but they're all going to start at corner and then, see what happens. But, at least one, if not more of those guys will move to safety. But every time you move one of those corners to safety, you find yourself needing more depth. How do they get in this situation? You look back over the recruiting classes. I always talk about that. You always talk about how the recruiting tells the tale of recruiting always tells the tale of how your roster came together. And I think, you really, if you consider this 2020 roster, it should be built with recruits from 2016 to the present. The kids in the 2016 class should be redshirt seniors on this year's roster if they redshirted at some point. You look back at the 2016 class, you look at the cornerbacks that they signed, you've got DeMar Hamlin. He's still here, but he's playing safety. George Hill, who was a 4-star athlete, could have played offense, could have played defense. He never even participated in training camp. He was medically disqualified over the summer before his freshman year. Henry Miller moved to safety and then the linebacker and then transferred. And I don't think he made any impact at all at any of those positions. And then Theron Coleman ultimately played some safety, played some nickel, played some corner, made a huge game-clinching interception against Syracuse back in 2018, but never really could crack the 2-deep. Honestly, he was never really in the rotation. He would play, I think, in 2017. Yeah, I think it was 2017 they used Theron Coleman as a nickel defensive back at Syracuse, where it was really one of the first times you saw Pitt use an extra corner as a nickel as opposed to an extra safety as that 5th defensive back when they've gone to some of the sub packages. But Theron Coleman really never could carve out a niche. So your entire 2016 class of corners, they're all gone. There's nothing there from that group. 2017, Mathis and Pinnock, that's good. You got two guys in that class, and they've both been very good. 2018 is some of those guys we just mentioned. Judson Tallender, Marquez Williams, they're on the roster, but neither has really made an impact. They're going to need to make an impact this year. And then Valik Carter, who they signed as a corner, obviously started him at corner and then, moved him to offense in the middle of the 2018 season, got a lot out of him, at least for one game, got some good plays out of him last year, game-winning touchdown against Duke this past season. And then I think this offseason the coaches wanted to move him back to defense, and Valik Carter didn't want to do that. So he went in the transfer portal, probably at some point tried to come back to Pitt, and then ultimately ended up transferring to Albany, where he's going to have a chance to play on offense. So, you run down that list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guys from the 2016 through 2018 classes, your upperclassmen, 9 guys, and you've got 4 of them still on the roster playing cornerback. Mathis, Pinnock, Tallender, and Williams, and only 2 of them have actually played any kind of meaningful snaps. This is how you end up in the situation you're in. And then you really didn't make any. The Pitt coaches didn't help themselves in 2019. They signed 1 corner, AJ Woods, and we could go back and forth about whether they needed MJ Devonshire out of Aliquippa, a 4-star kid that they were kind of slow played a little bit early in the process. Didn't offer him as soon as you would expect a star player at Aliquippa to get offered. They kind of took it slow with him. He ultimately ended up deciding to go to Kentucky. They could definitely use him now. You wonder about Daquan Hardy, who I think was in that class. Penn Hill's kid who got a very, very late offer from Penn State and ended up going there. Pitt never offered him. You wonder if maybe they should have gone after him because they signed 1 corner in the 2019 class. So now Mathis and Pinnock will be done after this year. Your upperclassmen next season in 2021, you're looking at Tallender, you're looking at Williams, and you're looking at Woods. 3 guys who will be, red shirt, 3rd year or better, or entering their 3rd seasons or more. Tallender and Williams will be in their 4th seasons, I believe, because they're redshirt sophomores this year, I think. Woods will be a sophomore this year. So those, Tallender and Williams will be redshirt juniors. AJ Woods will be a junior. But that's it in terms of upperclassmen. So the moral of this story is, for as much as Pat Narduzzi has emphasized cornerback recruiting, for as important as the position has been, and for as much as Pitt said about trying to get a bunch of corners. They signed, like I say, 4 guys in that 2016 class. They really kind of missed on some guys early on, and had a few guys just kind of bust out, not in the good way, and it's created some pretty big holes in the depth. Now, there is something to be said for this staff. I think they've got a reputation for developing cornerbacks, and I think it's deserved. I think you look at what they did with Dane Jackson from the 2015 recruiting class, and they helped him develop from sort of a positionless athlete into an NFL draft pick, 7th round, but still. And I think there is some benefit of the doubt that this staff gets, that Pat Narduzzi gets, when it comes to defensive backs. And so we'll wait and see. We'll see if they were right about AJ Woods. I think they stole him away from James Madison or Old Dominion. And we'll see what they got in this 2020 class. It doesn't look like they got much. Because Royal, Sellers, and Battle, I don't know. They all look like safeties to me. I could be wrong, but they all look like safeties to me. So that makes this 2021 class really important. They've really got to get it right. And not just get it right, they've got to get it right like 3 or 4 times. And they've got 2 commitments at cornerback already. And Noah Bigelow and Khalil Anderson. And I think they're good. Bigelow, we talked about him after he committed. I did a reaction video here on YouTube. You should subscribe, by the way, to Panther-Lair.com on YouTube. You're on the YouTube live stream right now. You should click that subscribe button while you're watching. Hit that so we can, so you can stay aware. If some news happens, and really we should have done one on Friday night after Pitt got 2 commitments. But when some of this news comes out, we go and fire up the old live stream and talk about it for a little while. And we did that after Noah Bigelow committed. I did a reaction podcast, and I talked about Bigelow and how he's just got a nose for the ball. He's got a knack for finding the ball and going and getting it. And I think that's a good start to the cornerback class. I think Khalil Anderson's a great addition to the cornerback class. I think they still need at least one more and possibly two more. They need more guys in this class. They need to attack this problem. You've heard me use this phrase before about different positions, not necessarily cornerback, although I might have even said it about that. They need to attack this problem with numbers. They need a lot of corners in this class, this 2021 class. And that's of pretty high importance. They need to get a lot of numbers, and they need to get it right. They need to sign 4 guys and have at least 2, if not 3 of them, be contributors. Guys who are, and you're probably going to need one of them to come in and play as a freshman. That's a tall order. Because, right now, I really like Khalil Anderson. I really like Noah Bigelow. I'm not sure if either one of those guys is ready to contribute as a freshman, but they've got a whole senior season to kind of iron that out. But it's a dicey situation right now with Pitt's cornerback depth. And if you remember, we did a position ranking. Or I did a position ranking a few weeks ago or a few months ago at some point. I don't even know if it was, I think it was during the quarantine. It might not have been. And I think I had the corners, I forgot where I put them, reasonably high on the strength of Mathis and Pinnock, but with a big, big question mark about the depth there because you just don't know what you have. It's funny, before we jump into it, I'm going to crack a cold one. You should, if you're not already drinking, you should be, because what else are you doing? It's Tuesday night, man. You cut loose. We had Platform last week with the Haze Jude, the hazy IPA that they had last week, and this week we've got the Sun Surfer, which is a Hawaiian-style IPA with notes of pineapple, guava, and citrus. So you can see it. I always like Platform's cans. They're nice and simple. That is citrusy. Guava-y. Yeah, that's good. It's a good beer. I highly recommend it. Go find any of the platforms. I've really enjoyed their stuff. But, this one's Sun Surfer. Really tasty. But, on Panther-Lair.com, we've been doing a series, I call it Anatomy of a Position. And we just kind of break down the current state of Pitt's roster, position by position. And we've really worked through almost all of them. We're almost done. And on Tuesday, we ran the feature on linebackers. And when we did those position rankings, whenever that was a month or two ago, I think I had the linebackers like 7th. Pretty low. Maybe the lowest on the defense, which is interesting because I think it was David Hale from ESPN.com ranked Pitt's linebackers number 1 in the ACC. And it's funny to have that much contrast. Somebody has to be the bottom spot on Pitt's defense. I think there are a lot of good players, a lot of good position groups on this defense. But if you're going to rank the position groups, there's got to be a number 1, and there's got to be a number. You should go ends, tackles, linebackers, corners, safeties. There's got to be a 5. Somebody's got to be at the bottom of that group. And I picked the linebackers. And the reason I picked the linebackers is because it's a little bit like the corners. The corners, you have Mathis and Pinnock, and then a giant pile of question marks. By the end of the season, you may feel really great about it. You don't know. You have to see what these guys can actually do when they're thrown into the spotlight. And the linebackers are sort of similar, with the big difference being you need 3 guys to play, and they've got, what do they have at linebacker? So they have Phil Campbell, who started, I think, every game last season, and you feel really good about him. I think that transition from safety to linebacker went really well. He excelled. I think he played really well for Pitt after moving to linebacker. You've got Cam Bright, who I don't think started any games, but was really productive as a reserve outside linebacker. He split time with Campbell at that star linebacker position. I think one or both of those guys played, kind of rotated with Kylan Johnson at money linebacker. I think you feel good about those two. I think those two are solid, reliable linebackers. And I think their experience and their performance last year is where maybe David Hale gained some confidence about Pitt's linebackers. But when you look in the middle with Chase Pine, I don't know. I need to see him actually do it. He's shown these flashes over the last 4 years or 3 years or however, he came in the 2016 class and redshirted, so he's played 3 seasons, and he showed some flashes over those 3 seasons. Now, is he ready to step in and be the starting middle linebacker for, 12 games, 13 games, whatever? He hasn't been able to stick at the position. He hasn't been able to take the starting job, even though, 2 years ago, Quentin Reginus got hurt and had to miss the rest of the season, and they went to who started after him? Elias Reynolds, I guess. Started after Quentin Reginus went out. And then, this past season, Reynolds was a starter. He goes out, and Salim Brightwell takes over. They don't go to Chase Pine. Chase Pine hasn't been able to take one of the open starting jobs that have been there. Virtually every year there's been an opening starting job just about every season of Chase Pine's career at Pitt, and he hasn't been able to clinch one of those jobs. Now, he's a senior this year. It's his 5th season. He's seen a lot in this defense. He understands how it works. He should know it as well as anyone, and he needs to if he's going to play middle linebacker. But I need to see it before I'm actually going to rank Pitt's linebackers and say, boy, yeah, that group's going to be really good. I can't say that when I don't know what the middle linebacker is going to do. And then behind those guys, it's just as bad as it is at corner. I shouldn't say bad. There's as little depth at linebacker as there is at cornerback, and that gives me great pause. And when you talk about, like I said, we do these anatomy of a position features where we break down what the recruiting classes look like. That's the first place we look. We always go to the recruiting first. We say, okay, recruiting classes 2016 to 2020. These are the classes that'll make up the roster for this season. And when you look at that list, okay, and you look at it with the consideration of, okay, 2016, 2017, that's going to be the upperclassmen, the 4th and 5th year players on this roster. And 2018, that's going to be like the 4th year player, 18, 19, 20, the 3rd year player. So, 18, 17, 16, those 3 classes are the upperclassmen. Those are the guys you're going to be relying on. You want to be relying on. Well, when you look at that group, the linebackers they signed 7 guys. 3 in 2016, 3 in 2017, 1 in 2018. In 2016, they signed Kazon Pugh, Chase Pine, Elias Reynolds. 2017, they signed Cam Bright, Albert Tucker, and Kyle Nunn. In 2018, they signed Wendell Davis. Now, if you are a Pitt fan, if you follow Pitt closely, you're aware of their roster. You know that Kazon Pugh is no longer here. You know that Elias Reynolds is no longer here. You know that Albert Tucker is no longer here. And you know that Kyle Nunn is no longer here. 3 recruiting classes have put, or out of the linebackers they've signed over the course of 3 recruiting classes, only 3 are still with the team. Those numbers are alleviated a little bit, or mitigated a little bit, by the transition of Phil Campbell from safety to linebacker. So you add 1 in. So you get 4 linebackers out of 3 recruiting classes. That's not good enough. And now you're going to have to be relying on, you have to rely on second-year players on your 2 deep, which is not ideal. It's not an impossible situation. I think, Brandon George, I think, has a lot of potential. I think Servassier Dennis is really intriguing as a I guess he'll be a sophomore. I don't think he redshirted last year. He's intriguing as an outside linebacker. Brandon George is intriguing as a middle linebacker, potentially a money linebacker. But you'd really like to have some upperclassmen to fill out your 2 deep. So now you're going to have Campbell, Pine, Bright as your starters. Wendell Davis, who will be a redshirt sophomore, will probably be the backup middle linebacker. You need 2 backup outside linebackers, and it's going to be guys who haven't played much at all. Servassier Dennis played a little bit. He played a lot last year, but mostly on special teams. Played a little bit on defense early in the season and really didn't see much after that. Leslie Smith might have played 1 or 2 games on special teams, something like that. So those guys have virtually no experience. And I really like this freshman class of linebackers. Really do. Solomon DeShields, Bengali Kamara, A.J. Roberts. Roberts is probably the middle linebacker. Kamara and DeShields are outside guys. I think DeShields is a really intriguing prospect. I think he can get on the field and contribute at least on special teams. I think he can run well enough to play on special teams, and I think he's got a chance to play in the defense this year, but do you really want a true freshman to be your backup star linebacker? That's a less than ideal situation. Less than ideal. And so it's funny because we talk so much about how well this staff has recruited defense, but right now they're in a situation in 2020 where they've got no experienced depth at cornerback and no experienced depth at linebacker. And I don't say this to mean that I think they've done a poor job recruiting defense. I think they have done well recruiting defense. I think they have rebuilt this defense, and they turned it into a really good outfit last year that should be even better this season. It should be one of the best defenses in the ACC and maybe one of the best defenses in the country this season. But boy, there are some depth questions at some of these positions. There's some depth questions at cornerback and linebacker in particular. Safety to some extent too, really. You don't have a lot there. Damn, that defensive line is stacked though. So you got that going for you, which is nice. All right, let's get some questions. Here we got a lot of comments and conversation on the YouTube live stream. We appreciate everyone chiming in and joining in. Pitt fan 234. Besides Elliott Donald, who I expect to commit, what other 4-star guys does Pitt have a legit chance at? It's interesting. Naquan Brown is a 4-star defensive end out of Virginia. He put Pitt on in his top 6, which he released on Tuesday. He's teammates with drawing a blank. Miles Alston, the wide receiver commitment, the recruit who committed to Pitt in late April. Yeah, they're teammates, so that helps. You've got the Chris Beatty angle. We've talked a lot about Beatty, Pitt's wide receivers coach, and how good of a job he's doing in recruiting Virginia. And so you've got some things working in Pitt's favor there. They're going to have a really good defensive line this year that should impress anybody who wants to play D-line in college, but they're up against some tough competition for Naquan Brown, so that's going to be a tough one. Roman, who's always on the live chat, we appreciate him. He mentions Naquan Brown, great names to be mentioned with. Roman then says, what was the deal with Stephon Hall and his tweet? Any more info there? Well, Stephon Hall, who I talked about committed on Friday, put out a tweet on Monday saying recruitment 100% open. And I'm not really sure what he was thinking. I don't know what the thought was in doing that. I reached out to him. I'm like, hey man, are you decommitting? Is that what this means? Your recruitment is 100% open? Is this what you're saying? He said, no, that's it. That's not it. I'm just open to taking more visits. Kids, I think we often think that these recruits are savvy about the recruiting process. I think we often believe that they have followed recruiting as closely as we have, we know all the ins and outs, that they know all the ins and outs, and that there are people advising them on what to do and what not to do and how to approach this and how to approach that. But the reality is some of these guys just, they're not thinking real clearly on this, or they're maybe a little bit naive about what the process is and how it's going to work if you attempt to do something like that. If you attempt to go out and say, I'm going to take more visits. Well, your head coach is Pat Narduzzi. And Pat Narduzzi might not, look too fondly on that idea. And there have been times in the past when recruits have taken other visits. I mean, Jordan Addison took a visit to Maryland right before signing day last December. Chase Pine, who we were talking a lot about, took a visit to Virginia Tech late in the process. They had guys in the last 2 recruiting classes who took official visits to other schools. Pitt stayed by them and continued, wanted them to be in their class, and those guys ended up flipping to other schools, decommitting, and you're going to have that, and you'll probably have it happen to some extent this year. And so Pat Narduzzi will often say, if you're going and visiting other schools and looking at other schools, then we're going to host other recruits on visits at your position, and we're going to try and recruit other guys. And I think he does that to some extent, but I think he also, if Elliott Donald were to commit, and want to take another visit, I don't think Pitt's going to drop him from the recruiting class. Nikai Johnson, defensive end, 4-star guy out of West Mifflin. He's been committed since last summer. If he ends up wanting to take a visit to Penn State or someplace, Pitt's not going to drop him from the commitment list. So, and there's something to be said for the fact that some guys can get away with things that maybe other guys can't. And I don't know where Stephon Hall falls on that spectrum. I don't know how strongly, the Pitt staff feels one way or the other. I think they were excited to land him. I think he's a good prospect. He's a big tackler, like 108 tackles or something last season, 3 interceptions. Big hitter. Somebody I know compared him to a Ramon Walker for Pitt fans who kind of have that frame of reference from the last couple decades. But I don't think he was really thinking it through I don't think he was thinking it through when he sent that tweet. And the tweet was deleted in a few minutes. So I don't necessarily think the Pitt coaches called him up and said, "Hey, what are you doing? Stop, take that tweet down." But I think he thought better of it and decided to pull it down after that. Anthony Scaramastro, I hope I got that right, says, any idea when Elliott Donald, Dorian Ford, and Khalil Dinkins decide? So Elliott Donald, the defensive end, 4-star defensive lineman, really out of Central Catholic. Dorian Ford, a defensive tackle out of Baldwin, and Khalil Dinkins, a tight end out of North Allegheny. I don't know what their timelines are, Anthony, and to be honest, I don't think they know what their timelines are. I don't think those recruits know for sure when they're going to commit. It's so up in the air right now. I don't think anybody knows what they plan to do. I think the recruits who commit get a little bit trigger happy to some extent, and they see the uncertainty, and their way of reacting to the uncertainty is just to jump in. I think that's probably what has happened with some of the guys who have committed to Pitt, which is going to make the next 6 months of the recruiting process for those guys interesting. But then I think there are guys who kind of lean the other way, and obviously guys with more options have more opportunity and to lean the other way and to take more time. But I get the sense from Donald and Ford and Dinkins that they're not really in a rush. And those guys have good offers. They're top targets for Pitt. There's no question about it. But they've got opportunities to wait. I think Pitt is in varying degrees of a good spot with each of those 3 guys. But I don't think they have any timelines right now. And I think it's going to be kind of up in the air, and you just kind of see what happens. Nicholas Temperio says the defense will probably lose the entire D-line and secondary after this season, and a fair chance all 8 end up in an NFL camp. That's a huge talent drain. If you look at the defensive line, you've got Rashad Weaver, Patrick Jones, and Keyshawn Camp are all going to graduate. They're going to be out of eligibility, so those guys are definitely gone. Pretty good chance, I would say, that Jalen Twyman goes. Wouldn't say the same about Deslin Alexandra. Wouldn't really think Habakkuk Baldonado's going anywhere, or John Morgan, or Devin Danielson, or David Green, or Tyler Bentley, or, in the lower classes, even Kalijah Cansey, or Bam Brema. There's some depth and talent, and it runs, the talent runs pretty deep on the defensive line. Now, it's going to be tough. If you lose 4 guys, if you lose those 4 guys that I mentioned, if you lose Weaver, Camp, Jones, and Twyman, and 3 of those 4 are definitely done, and you would think Twyman is pretty likely to go after his redshirt junior season. If you lose those 4 guys, that's a huge amount of talent to replace. There's no question about it. But they've got some really good players waiting in the wings there. And I think they've got it. I don't know if there'll be fall off. I don't know what that group is going to produce this season. I think they're going to be really good. I think they're going to put up big numbers. I think they're going to have just as big of an impact as they had last year. And I think they will get talked about as, one of the best defensive lines in the ACC and one of the best units in the country. So there's inevitably going to be a fall off, I think, when you lose that kind of talent. But I think they've got some really good players waiting in the wings. I'm not as worried about the defensive line as I am about what you mentioned, Nicholas, the defensive backs. Like I mentioned, Mathick and Pinnock. I'm not going to even try to mix those 2 names up. Pinnock and Mathis are both done. They're seniors this year. Damar Hamlin, I don't think he's going to get a 6th year. He got a 5th year. I don't think he's going to get a 6th year. Paris Ford, odds don't favor him coming back. Kind of like Jalen Twyman. The odds don't favor either one of those guys being back in 2021. And that's where you have a bigger problem. Because as it stands right now, you've got no developed depth at cornerback. At safety, you've got one guy, Eric Hallett, who has played, and Hallett played a decent amount last season. I think he looked pretty good. I think he's got a chance to be a starting safety, in the future. So you've got one out of 4 spots where you're probably going to lose starters after this season, and those 4 defensive back spots. You've got one guy who you come into this year saying, well, he's got some pretty decent experience. So yeah, you've got some big holes to fill in the defensive backfield. And one of the things to watch this season is not just going to be how well Hamlin plays and how well Ford plays and how well Pinnock and Mathis play. It's going to be how well Marquez Williams plays, or A.J. Woods, or Judson Towner, or Brandon Hill at safety, or whoever else they're going to move to safety, because I don't know who their other backup safeties will be. It'll probably be Hamlin and Ford backed up by Hallett and Hill. But you probably need some other safeties who are ready to play. And I don't know who those guys are going to be, especially if you keep all the freshmen, Javonte Royal and Rashad Battle and Hunter Sellers at cornerback. You do have Buddy Mack, who signed as a safety and coming in as a safety, or coming in as a freshman to play safety. But, maybe him. Maybe he's number 5 on the safety chart. They're going to have a lot to replace on the defense after this season. There's no question about it. Feel good about what they've got, in the pipeline up front. Feel okay about some of the depth at linebacker, although it's all unproven. So the depth at cornerback is unproven, and the depth at linebacker is unproven. I feel better about those backup linebackers than I do about the backup cornerbacks. And that's just based on what I think of those guys as recruits and what I've heard about, some of the guys who have already been on campus. I feel better about the backup linebackers who have not done anything in college yet than I do about the backup cornerbacks who have not done anything in college yet. So that's there's a lot to work on. The Pitt coaches have a lot of work to do this season and beyond. Anthony Scaramastro chimes in again and says Pitt will look at the grad transfer pool for defensive backs after this season. Well, Anthony, they looked at the grad transfer pool for defensive backs this year. They tried to get Nick McLeod, a cornerback from NC State, to come into the team as a transfer cornerback, and he ended up going to Notre Dame. So that's not, they were already trying to address that issue this season. And will they try again? You would think so. That would make sense. That would make sense for them to go for it. So I was trying to find something real quick here. Let's see. Zach W. says, any chance we can get the Panther-Lair podcast on Spotify? And he says, sorry if that's been asked before. And it has been asked before, Zach, and I apologize. I've tried to get it on Spotify. I've put things in there. I've clicked the buttons, and for some reason it just hasn't gone through. I'll try that again. I'll see if I can get that fixed. I know a lot of people are on Spotify. I know a lot of people get their podcasts through Spotify. I sort of assume that everyone gets their podcasts through iTunes and Apple Music or the podcast app or whatever it is. And so I send it there. I know it goes through there, but I know also a lot of people use Spotify. So we're going to keep working on that. I apologize for it not happening yet. Roy Speakham says, speaking of the position rankings, I wish I wrote those down and compared them to David Hale's list that he did for 2020. Let me see if I have it written down. I'm not sure if I kept it, Royce. I apologize. I'm checking here. Oh, there it is. Okay, I found my position rankings. So, I'm not going to be able to. I won't be able to put them on the screen, but once they open up on my computer, I'll run it down real quick. If it would actually open. This is a fun thing. This is what's fun about doing things on the fly, as you wait for your computer to load up to bring up an image. Royce points out that David Hale from ESPN.com, who covers the ACC, ranked Pitt's linebackers number 1 in the ACC and the defensive backs in the defensive line number 2. Here it is. So I went defensive ends number 1, safeties number 2. This is just on Pitt's team Pitt's roster, and I'm remembering that some of these were controversial. Number 1 was defensive ends. Number 2 was safeties. Number 3 was quarterbacks. Number 4 was defensive tackles. Number 5 was cornerbacks. Number 6 was the interior offensive linemen, the guards in the center. Number 7 was linebackers. Number 8, wide receivers. Number 9, tight ends. Number 10, running backs. And number 11, the offensive tackles. So I think some of those things did line up with what David Hale said. Like I say, the linebackers, we have a very different opinion on those. But I think it's probably about the depth that I just don't see, is unproven. And even not just the depth, but needing to see Chase Pine actually step up and become, a starting middle linebacker and step into that role. Dale Gribble says, we still need that top-tier quarterback. Kenny Pickett is a good, hard-working player, but we need a run-pass option quarterback. Yeah, sure. Everybody does, Dale, right? Who doesn't want a top-tier quarterback and a run-pass option quarterback? I think one thing that'll help quarterbacks is having an offensive coordinator a couple years in a row. It'll help with recruiting quarterbacks because you'll be able to develop those relationships over time and not just a new coordinator trying to recruit guys every year. Instead it'll be, you can develop relationships starting when guys are freshmen or sophomores and kind of build from there. You'll also be able to get the guys that fit your system. Who was the last quarterback who was playing for an offense that he was recruited to run? 2015, Chad Wojcik was recruited by, he was recruited by Todd Graham, and he ends up running Paul Chryst's offense and then Jim Chaney's offense. 2016, who do they have out there? Nathan Peterman, who was actually recruited to run the offense. I guess in 2015, Peterman was there as well. He was actually, that's a good example. Peterman in 2016 was recruited to run Jim Chaney's offense, and he ends up running Matt Canada's offense. 2017, they got Max Brown, who was recruited by Matt Canada, and he ends up running Sean Watson's offense. 2018, you've got Kenny Pickett, who was recruited by Matt Canada to run his offense, and he ends up running Sean Watson's offense. And then this past season, again, Kenny Pickett recruited to run Matt Canada's offense, and he's running Mark Whipple's offense. Once you get to 2021, 2019, like I said, once you get to 2021, you'll have, who knows? Because if it's Davis Bevel or it's Nick Patty, you'll have a guy, who was recruited to run Sean Watson offense, and he'll be running Mark Whipple's offense, assuming Whipple is still the offensive coordinator in 2021. Now, if Joey Yellen or, as a freshman, Nate Yarnell wins the job, then you'll have a guy that Whipple actually recruited running his offense, which will be a unique thing that we have not seen since... Who was the last Pitt quarterback who ran the offense he was recruited for? I guess Nate Peterman in 2015, right? Was recruited by Chaney and played for Chaney. Can't think of, before that, it was Wojcik in 2014. He was recruited by Graham. Tom Savage in 13, I guess, was recruited by the Pitts. Yeah, he was recruited by the Paul Chryst staff because he was there in 2012. So it could be, you could say Tom Savage in 13. Obviously not Tino Sinceri in 2012 or 2011, or even 2010 because he was recruited by Matt Kavanaugh and ended up playing for Frank Signetti in 2010. So, it's been a long freaking time. They haven't had a consistent run of quarterbacks playing for the guy who recruited them, the coordinator who recruited them, in a long time. I really can't. Bill Stahl, I guess, was the last one who played multiple seasons as the starting quarterback under the coordinator who recruited him to Pitt. Right? Because he was recruited by... Well, no, he didn't even play multiple seasons. He was recruited by Kavanaugh, played 08 as the starter the whole season under Kavanaugh. But at 09, it was Frank Signetti. Jesus. So it was probably a Walt Harris quarterback. Would have been the last time. Probably Rod Rutherford would have been the last quarterback to play multiple seasons as the starter under the coordinator who recruited him. I need a drink. Just because I had to make my brain work a lot to think about that. All right. Let's see. Josh Newark says, assuming a 12-game season, the first 3, maybe 4 games gives Pitt a lot of potential opportunities to play second-team guys and get experience. Yeah, it should be. That should be the situation. They should be able to play themselves into a position against Richmond and Marshall and Miami of Ohio. They should have a lot of opportunities there to get some backups on the field. That hasn't always worked out for Pitt. Let's just say that. It hasn't always worked out for Pitt that they've been able to get those backups out there. You know, they haven't always put themselves in a position to be able to do that. On to Green 19 has a question that we are going to address, and we're going to do it right now. And we'll touch on it briefly, and then we'll move on to some other topics before we get done here. On to Green 19 says, Chris, did you read Sean Gentili's article in The Athletic? Any thoughts you can share from your perspective on the fallout? So Sean Gentili, who does a great job at The Athletic, wrote for that outfit, or that outlet, I should say, about Pitt and Pat Narduzzi and the former player Elias Reynolds, and maybe what the atmosphere, the culture around the Pitt program is, particularly with regards to race relations, and talk about Narduzzi using the word thug, and maybe telling players to cut their dreads or not wear their hat, telling black players not to wear their hat backwards. I can't speak to whether or not those things happen. I wasn't there. That doesn't mean that they didn't happen, and it doesn't mean that they did. On some of the more specific accusations that Elias Reynolds and others mentioned. It's been a series of events dating back to last weekend when you had riots and protests over the murder of George Floyd, and a lot of leaders in a lot of different spaces and a lot of different areas of life were making statements showing support. And Pat Narduzzi did not do that. He didn't do it until last Tuesday. And he went through the whole weekend and went through Monday. And it wasn't until Tuesday that he came out and said something. And I thought he made a strong statement on Twitter when he said that, I don't usually use Twitter for political or social reasons, so I didn't say anything to this point. And he used some strong words, I thought, to talk about it. And I think I talked about this on the podcast last week when I said that, I think Narduzzi did what he was supposed to do. He did what he should do. He should show support for his players. And he should have made a comment sooner. He should have had a reaction earlier. He should have had something to say to show that he stands for his players, that he respects his players. He's going to support his players for whom this issue is very important. Then you go through the week, and Elias Reynolds, former Pitt linebacker, tweets some things, some accusations about what the culture was actually like under Narduzzi. And you go through the weekend, and on Tuesday, Narduzzi put out a statement. And I think there was probably a lot of deliberation, a lot of debate for Pat Narduzzi and people around him on the Pitt staff and Pitt administration and whatnot about what to do, about how to respond to this. Do you go up on a Zoom call and take questions from media? Do you put out a statement? Do you just ignore it and try and pretend like it wasn't said? I think that was the least good option. I think that was the worst option, quite frankly, to just try to ignore it. On Tuesday, he released a statement, and I'll read you Pat Narduzzi's statement. This is what he says. It's not too long. He says, quote, "Our team held some very honest and painful discussions over the past week about what it's like to be black in America. While I'm usually the one directing the talk in the team meetings, I made it a point to simply listen and learn. Players learn from coaches, but I've always said coaches learn from players too. I'm thankful for how the young men in our program opened it up and shared their personal painful experiences. Our country today is very troubled. But I believe tomorrow can and will be better based on what I'm seeing and hearing from our players. They are inspiring to me. I'm thankful for them and honored to be their coach. I want to address the word thug and its use in our program. Simply put, it's not allowed. Last season, I learned how that word and what it suggests has changed. Through our regular discussions and our weekly Players Leadership Council, our players shared their feelings on that word. Our program understands it will not be part of our vocabulary. These can't be one-time conversations. We're going to have ongoing dialogue, educating each other and caring for each other. Only by working together can we create a better team, a better community, a better country. That's our goal, and I'm honored to be part of that process." End quote. I think Narduzzi's statement was really good. I think it was really good because not only does it say I support my players, it says, you know what? I learned from my players. I got something wrong, and they told me it was wrong, and I was humble enough and wise enough to listen to them and to take what they said under consideration and have respect for them and have empathy for their situation and their perspective on things. And I changed how I conduct myself as a result of what my players said. That's exactly what you want to hear from a coach and people in a lot of walks of life. But from a college football coach in particular, you want to hear them say, I listen to my players. They told me that this is how they feel. I respect them. I empathize with them. And I'm adjusting my perspective based on what I've heard from my players. And I think, there could still be questions asked. There are still things that people could ask Pat Narduzzi about with regards to Elias Reynolds' comments, and maybe some comments have come from other players on the record and off the record. But I think he covered a lot of ground. I think he covered a lot of space in that statement, and really, I think closed the door on a lot of the different conversations that could be had about what goes on in the Pitt program. And I think he nailed it. I think he got it really right, and that's my perspective on it. You know, I can't say how it goes over in the locker room. I can't say what happened in the locker room to precede it. But I think, if we take Pat Narduzzi's statement as being genuine and sincere, then then I think it was good, and I think it was the right approach. So that's my thought on that. I'm hopeful that. Well, I don't want to say I'm hopeful that we move on and we never bring this up again. I think there are important conversations to have with the players on the team. You know what I mean? And with the coaches. I think these conversations should continue and need to continue and will continue. But, I want to hear how this program is moving forward. I want to hear how these players are moving forward. I want to hear how these coaches are moving forward. I think that's the important part. And I think with Pat Narduzzi's statement, maybe we're moving on to that part of the conversation. Josh Newark says, I thought Narduzzi's willingness to listen, to learn, and to change his vernacular here is welcomed. Yeah, I think so too. And I think he did a really good job with that. We'll see what happens once you get to, training camp, or even sooner when Pat Narduzzi gets in front of a microphone. And we'll see if questions are asked of him. I wouldn't be surprised if they are, and we'll see how he handles them. And, I think he can be a bit of a loose cannon sometimes, shoot from the hip a little bit, and maybe go off script and off the cuff when it's not necessarily advisable to do so. So it'll be interesting to see how those situations play out. But I think as far as addressing the situation right now, addressing the concerns that have been voiced, I think he did a good job of it. We'll see where things go from there. Of course, the Pitt football team moved on to campus this past weekend. I think Sunday and Monday it was sort of phased in. I don't know exactly what they're going to be doing and how they're going to be doing it. I would think you're going to have a lot of social distancing. I would assume. I can't say that it's true or not because we don't know, but I would assume there's going to be testing for COVID-19. I would assume there's going to be a quarantine period, and I would assume that when they do go to the weight room or try to go to the field to do something, they're going to be split up into smaller groups so you can maintain some distancing. I was on 93.7 The Fan on Tuesday, talking with Andrew Filipponi and Chris Muller, and they asked me, Pitt, the players moving back on campus, does that give you optimism about the likelihood of having a college football season this year? And yes, to some extent. I think any movement toward normalcy, toward a normal thing happening or a normal time, a normal schedule, which players moving into campus would be a normal schedule. That would be some kind of a normal thing. Any movement in that direction is going to make me feel optimistic about the likelihood of a season because, having a season is the normal thing. So the more normal things we do, the more regularly scheduled things we do, the more I feel like the regularly scheduled season is going to happen. More to the point, though, I think what gave me greater optimism was Pitt announcing, Pitt the university announcing their schedule for the fall, where they're going to have, and we talked about this, I think, a couple of weeks ago. I think Notre Dame announced something similar to this, and a few other schools where they're going to do almost a compressed schedule. Sort of, they're going to start a little bit earlier in August. They're going to skip their fall breaks. They're going to have classes on Labor Day, and they're going to try and be done with finals and have the kids done with the fall semester by Thanksgiving break, so nobody comes back after Thanksgiving break. That's encouraging to me. That was a big thing I wanted to see. I wanted to see the university come out and say, here's how we're going to get kids on campus this fall. Here's how we're going to get the students in Oakland this fall. Because I've said it all along. If you don't have students in Oakland, I don't think you can have football games. I think if you are not comfortable saying we can have college, I don't think you can say we're comfortable having college football. I don't think you can compel players to come to campus if you're not compelling students to come to campus. Right? I mean, it makes sense. How can you tell student athletes you've got to be here when you're telling students you don't have to be here? Or it's not safe for you to be here. Right? I guess that would be more to the point. Not that it's an option for students, but if you decide that you're canceling classes or you're doing it all remote, you're doing all online learning, if you're saying it's not safe for students to be on campus, I don't think you can turn around and say, student athletes, you've got to be on campus. So every step Pitt the university takes toward having a fall semester with students in Oakland, to me, is a step closer to having a football season. So those are the things I'm watching for. Those are the big steps I'm watching for. The players getting to campus, the players moving in, that's important too. But you got to have those classes. You got to have classes. You got to have a fall semester in person, not remote learning, not online, nothing like that. You've got to have a real fall semester. So that's the positive from my perspective. That's what I see and what I hope to see more of. All right. I think we got just about everything covered. I'm trying to think, did we have a conversation podcast last week? Oh yeah, we did. Oh, you got to check it out. I was forgetting which week it was. If you subscribe to our podcast, you should have this. If you don't, go seek it out. We talked to Sam Shulo Jr. last week. Sam is a Pitt historian who knows as much about Pitt as anybody you're going to meet, and he's passionate about it, and he's generous with his time, and he's great to talk to. He will tell you everything you need to know. You say a name, a year, or a place, and he's got some sort of Pitt anecdote that will relate to it. With Johnny Majors passing away last week, I decided it was time to get Sam on the podcast. I had wanted to have Sam on the podcast for a long time, because I've known Sam for a long time, and he's been great to talk to. He's always generous with his time. I said, I need to have Sam on the podcast at some point just to reminisce, just to go down memory lane and talk about Pitt history. When Johnny Majors passed away, I said, well, this is the perfect opportunity. It's time to get Sam on the podcast. If you're a Pitt fan, go listen to it. You will enjoy it because it's great. I mean, it's so many anecdotes, not just about Johnny Majors and his time at Pitt, but about what Pitt was like before Johnny Majors arrived, because I don't know if you realize the depths they were in, and Sam tells it in pretty stark terms about where Pitt was prior to 1973 and Johnny Majors arriving in Oakland. You got to go check that out. We got another great one this week, another behind the scenes person. It's not, like when we talked to Jeff Capel or Tyler Palco or Curtis Martin or anything like that. This is another behind the scenes person that I think you're really going to enjoy hearing from. So make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you can get that Friday Conversation podcast. We do it every Friday. Of course, we have the radio show on Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. on 93.7 The Fan. You can hear more Pitt talk right there on 93.7 The Fan in Pittsburgh. And then we have this podcast every Tuesday night at 8:30, the live stream, and then we release it as a podcast on Wednesday morning. And I appreciate everybody who chimed in on the live stream. This is what's fun about the live stream on YouTube. It's not about you seeing me in my Rivals hat and my overgrown hair and all, the weird wall behind me. It's not about that. It's about the live chat, so we can just sit and interact and have conversation and a little back and forth. Instead of just me just talking at you, you can chime in and say, hey, you're an idiot, or hey, what about this, or hey, how about this? And we can have a little conversation. And that's what's fun about it. So I appreciate everybody who jumped in tonight during the live stream. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com is the page on YouTube. You can go there. You subscribe to Panther-Lair.com, and you'll get alerts whenever we go live. So you'll know what we're doing. You'll see everything we put out. If you are on the live stream right now, we appreciate it. Make sure you hit that like button or subscribe, whatever the button is on YouTube. Hit it, because we want to run those numbers up. Try and get the YouTube page up, because I'm enjoying doing this. I hope you are too. We'd like to tell a friend and keep it going. All right, make sure you check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pittsburgh's news on the internet: football, basketball, recruiting. You can find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, we have message boards where these conversations we're having here for like an hour on a Tuesday night, we have these conversations 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the Panther-Lair.com message boards. Pittsburgh.rivals.com, Panther-Lair.com. Thanks again for everybody for coming in on the live stream. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Make sure you check out the website. Look for more podcasts throughout the week. And have a great week. We will talk to you again sometime soon.